The phenomenon of UFOs has been discussed for more than 1 decade, yet most conclusions remain more theoretical than based on facts. The same is true for cryptids, mysterious creatures whose appearances have been recorded in improbable reports. In 1990, mysterious predators appeared in Puerto Rico, as if they had stepped out of the pages of Lovecraft's novels. These creatures primarily attacked sheep, goats, and chickens, leaving behind the bodies of animals from which not a drop of blood remained. This is precisely why they were nicknamed Chupacabra, which translates to goat sucker. According to eyewitness accounts, these 1.5-meter-tall beings looked quite grotesque, with wings like those of bats, sharp teeth, and enormous red eyes. Whatever the nature of the Chupacabra phenomenon may be, very little is known about it. It is more appropriate to categorize it within the realm of cryptozoology rather than ufology, as there is no direct connection between these phenomena and UFOs. It is presumed that the Chupacabra is a creature of beastly appearance. In the literature of past years, one can find descriptions of similar creatures, such as the Jersey Devil, which appeared in New Jersey in the early 20th century. Its description closely matches that of the Chupacabra, and this name translates to blood-sucking wretch. The history of the Chupacabra began in Puerto Rico several years ago, although if one examines the documents, earlier mentions of this phenomenon can be found. In the 70s, Sebastian Lamarche lived on the island, the founder of the ufologist movement. He was an architect and a highly educated man. Lamarche published a book, the preface of which was written by Hynek. In it, numerous strange events occurring in this region are discussed, including a curious story from the 70s about a mysterious creature that was later named the Mako vampire. The description of this vampire and the Chupacabra is absolutely identical. Although much has been fabricated in the story of the Chupacabra by impressionable people, there is no doubt that it refers to the same creature. Something strange was indeed happening in Puerto Rico, and it provoked an inadequate reaction from society. The Chupacabra received excellent publicity in the media. Soon, reports about it began to arrive from Mexico, where, thanks to several journalists, the Chupacabra once again found itself in the spotlight. Then rumors about it migrated even further south, and finally in Chile, they took on a grotesque character. Allegedly, a nest of the Chupacabra was discovered, photographs of which immediately appeared on the internet, and later a special website was created. The Chilean yellow press picked up on these rumors and soon announced that the found nest had been destroyed by a bomb. A researcher who spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico shares his observations. I have spoken with a huge number of witnesses. For several years, I conducted serious research on this phenomenon there. There were also those who personally saw this creature. Believe me, there are quite a few such people in Puerto Rico. They say that this creature can fly, lands on the roofs of village houses, and terrorizes livestock. One of the most memorable witnesses was a Puerto Rican police officer who actually caught this creature attacking his dog. He shot it with his service weapon using a hollow point bullet. Despite this, the creature did not die and managed to escape. Blood was left at the scene, which was sent for examination to the Puerto Rico Police Department. The police willingly assisted the researcher in his work, providing access to all materials related to this case. He is convinced that this creature truly exists. It is unknown where this creature came from and what its true intentions are. However, according to some experts, its main task is to collect samples for extraterrestrial civilizations, including blood samples and other internal organs of earthly organisms. One such expert is Sebastian Lamarche, the founder of the ufologist movement in Puerto Rico. He expresses his opinion. I believe that this entity really exists. Lamarche refers to the Puerto Rican story of the vampire Mocha, which is supported by real facts and testimonies from veterinarians. However, as the so-called wave of Chupacabra spread southward, not a single real evidence of their appearance has been observed. No evidence, he emphasizes. Witnesses presented examinations of the killed chickens, but, as LaMarche notes, such cases can be explained by quite earthly realities, and there is nothing supernatural about it. To conduct serious research, undeniable material evidence is necessary. In the history of chupacabras, there is none. By the end of the 1990s, the phenomenon of chupacabras became increasingly known in ufologist circles. Although the connection between mysterious predators and UFOs has not been proven, reports of a new, unusual phenomenon began to emerge. In the city of Virginia, located 300 kilometers from Rio de Janeiro, one of the most curious events of the 90s was recorded. In January 1996, police captured mysterious beings, and this case was accompanied by numerous testimonies from both random witnesses and officials of the Brazilian police. 3 Brazilian schoolgirls noticed a strange creature by a wall, resembling a character from a science fiction movie. It was likely hiding from people. Soon, a police squad arrived at the scene with nets. On the same day, but in a different location, another similar creature was captured. They were sent to 2 different hospitals where medical professionals conducted thorough examinations. One of the beings died, and the autopsy of its body was performed by Dr. Beaton Paul Harris. Although there is no documentary evidence, LaMarche is convinced that it was indeed him. Details of this story appeared in many newspapers and books by Brazilian authors, he adds, noting that this extraordinary case can rightfully be called the Brazilian Roswell. The only difference is that this story happened quite recently, and there are numerous eyewitness accounts confirming the authenticity of this event. However, the official explanation was somewhat strange. It was supposedly dwarfs, a pregnant dwarf and her husband, who were trying to shelter from the rain. Of course, this fabricated explanation by the Brazilian authorities sounds just ridiculous, LaMarche says. He also recalls that the story in Virginia occurred in 1996. The first reports contained only the testimonies of those 3 girls from a poor neighborhood who encountered the mysterious being. In principle, this could be true, he notes. The girls were repeatedly questioned, and John Mack himself conducted an interrogation with them. Everyone was convinced that the girls were quite candid, although on the day of the incident, they were in a state of shock. The creature they saw was not wearing any clothes. From this point, the story takes an absolutely fantastic turn, LaMarche continues. The girls called the firefighters, who promptly arrived at the scene and captured the creature using only nets and sticks. Probably, this is the most disheveled alien one could possibly imagine, he jokes. The creature ran around the city naked, and it could be easily caught with a regular net. Nothing was found with it, so LaMarche believes that the captured being belongs more to the realm of cryptozoology rather than ufology. Meanwhile, the story of Rozoff and the events at the base were inflated by the press to incredible proportions. In those years, similar cases occurred in every country, and LaMarche remembers how Poland and Chile hurried to report similar events. The story of the monsters from Virginia became well known, despite the fact that most of the rumors remained just that, rumors. The testimonies of 3 frightened girls attracted attention, and soon many other accounts were added to them. There were reports of a flying saucer, an alien autopsy at a local clinic, a complete set. However, according to available data, none of these testimonies were confirmed by irrefutable facts. Brazilian ufologists found themselves in a difficult position, as now they had their own story, a flying saucer and a monster that emerged from it. It seemed that our planet was flooded with monsters from nightmarish visions, such as the chupacabra and the monster from Virginia. In such a context, it is worth taking seriously the tales of forest spirits, demons, and other mythical creatures. Nevertheless, in all these stories about unknown beings, there was one serious problem. There was no irrefutable physical evidence, aside from numerous, more or less plausible eyewitness accounts. Official documents confirming or disproving the existence of these beings were also absent. No one had seen photographs or videos capturing them. When the first rumors about the chupacabra appeared, Puerto Rican veterinarian Carlos Soto confirmed that some animals had been killed by an unusual predator that had not been seen in the area before. Unfortunately, a thorough investigation was never conducted, and the Puerto Rican monsters remained a zoological mystery for a long time. Every year, hundreds of pets die in the United States, Canada, and European countries. In most cases, their deaths are attributed to attacks by wolves, coyotes, or large avian predators. However, some incidents are not so easily explained. For example, the bodies of the killed animals lack anuses, reproductive organs, eyes, or ears, and it appears that these body parts were surgically removed. There were even cases where absolutely exsanguinated bodies were found. These unusual incidents led some to think that aliens might be involved. The phenomenon of animal deaths raises great interest. It is known that the National Research Institute of the United States conducted serious studies on this mysterious phenomenon. During the examination of the bodies, physical evidence was collected, including documented unusual incisions on the bodies of animals, which may have been made using a high-temperature source, such as a laser. There are no signs of ordinary predators on the carcasses, and there is a suggestion that the bodies underwent special treatment. What all this means remains unclear. Over the course of 3 years working on UFO mysteries, the author has repeatedly contacted the British Ministry of Agriculture to find out if there have been similar cases in the country. It turned out that such cases did indeed occur, but the author believes that these stories are connected to another unexplained mystery, the so-called wild cats that are allegedly found in the United Kingdom. Lynxes, leopards, and even lions were mentioned, and well-known cases of mysterious animal deaths have always been attributed to this narrative. Sometimes they could be explained by attacks from ordinary wild dogs or wolves, but detailed investigations in England have never been conducted. For now, all of this remains a mystery, and the author cannot offer any explanations. Personally, he believes that the mysterious deaths of animals are just as perplexing to researchers as the UFO phenomenon. These cases have been occurring for several years, and the first such phenomenon was recorded back in 1967 when a child died. In the 1970s, the number of reports only increased, reaching a peak in 1975 when local authorities demanded a state investigation into these unusual cases. In this context, a conversation with a retired police investigator named Romal comes to mind, who presented a report claiming that predatory birds were responsible for the deaths of the animals. There are facts that call into question the official conclusions regarding the causes of animal deaths. In one case, the skin was evenly removed from the entire head of the animal, raising questions about who could have done this. No predatory bird is capable of such intricate work. The local population has become seriously concerned about the huge number of cases of domestic animal deaths. Although most of these incidents occurred in America, similar cases have also been recorded in Canada and Europe, particularly in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, and the United Kingdom. In recent years, a wave of mysterious animal deaths has also swept through Argentina. Authorities attempted to blame wild rodents, but such a statement raises doubts. According to one theory, the cause of livestock deaths is the testing of secret military weapons. However, as one of the experts claims, this is unlikely. If the military truly needed test animals, they could conduct their experiments under strict secrecy in specially equipped laboratories. There is also a theory suggesting that the deaths of the animals are orchestrated by the military to blame it on aliens. This explanation, according to the expert, has no basis. He notes that the cases of animal deaths indeed coincide in time with the appearance of unidentified flying objects in various regions. Nevertheless, despite its popularity, the theory of alien intervention lacks documentary evidence. Some researchers attempt to establish a connection between the deaths of cows and the UFOs that were spotted in the area the day before. However, such coincidences occur extremely rarely. The expert, who has conducted 2 or 3 studies of similar cases, admits that he has no explanation for this mysterious phenomenon. Livestock owners were in a panic and could not understand the reasons for the deaths of their animals. Not being a veterinarian, the expert reached out to specialists in Canada. In their opinion, the cause could be either infectious diseases or predator attacks. They saw nothing mysterious in the facts presented. One of the serious researchers working in Brazil and having experience in this field examined numerous animal carcasses and believes that there is something more behind all this than the aggression of an earthly predator. However, he also does not think that it is worth looking for connections with ufology. Although this phenomenon represents an interesting phenomenon, professional pathologists need to be involved in its study. To date, the investigation of this phenomenon is mainly carried out by ufologists who do not possess specialized knowledge in the fields of veterinary medicine or pathological anatomy. The expert believes that it is precisely specialists in this area who can provide more authoritative answers. If the deaths of livestock are indeed caused by humans, the reasons are unlikely to be found in cult rituals. When considering the theory of a top-secret military operation supported by the government, one would have to indulge in too much speculation. For example, one might assume that agents of a secret organization prepared a series of complex tests to study the effects of a certain gas that will be used in the future in a chemical or biological attack. Let us assume that some substance was sprayed in the area. A few days later, a special unit began collecting skin samples from the deceased animals. This paranoid plan may not be as insane as it seems at first glance. Recently, secret documents from the FBI archive became available, which claimed that large doses of atropine, a powerful tranquilizer, were found in the blood of the deceased animals. According to another version, the animals were tested for the effects of vitamin B12 or other toxins on the lymphatic system. Although these theories may seem far-fetched, all official documents appear to follow a single directive. In 1980, official FBI reports emerged in the press stating that the investigations and deaths of animals were conducted at the request of the governor of the state of New Mexico. This document claimed that the cause of death of the animals was predators, and there was not a single mention of toxic substances found in some corpses. Even if one assumes that government Secret Service agents are behind this, the question arises, why did they use the code of farmers instead of laboratory animals? This and some other questions remain unanswered, creating fertile ground for the emergence of the most incredible theories. In the early 1980s, another phenomenon attracted the attention of ufologists: crop circles. They were described as circles of various diameters found early in the morning in grain fields. The plants were heavily flattened, but the stems were not broken. There were opinions that these strange formations were someone's crazy prank. Strangely enough, this phenomenon was only observed in the fields of southern England. While scientists pondered the theory of mini tornadoes that could have created these strange objects, the story took a new turn. Instead of circles in the fields, various geometric shapes began to appear, which over time became increasingly complex. This could no longer be attributed to a natural phenomenon. Whoever the mysterious creator of these forms was, he possessed high intelligence and capabilities inaccessible to mere mortals. In 1991, while researchers were trying to decipher the mysterious messages, the world was shaken by a new sensational announcement. 2 retirees, Duke Bauer and Dave Chorley, claimed that they were the ones who invented these crop circles. Their first experience dated back to the late 1970s when they used a regular board tied to a rope. At first, the press did not show much interest in the revelations of these retirees. However, after the appearance of new circles, journalists realized that this was a true sensation. But as often happens in such stories, the world was unwilling to believe the confession of the old men. Among those who believed in the extraterrestrial origin of the figures in the fields, a new rumor spread. Allegedly, Duke and Dave received a round sum for their false confessions. The circles in the fields took a worthy place among the mysterious phenomena of the last century. They mainly appeared on the slopes of hills in the southern part of England, where the first landings of presumed flying saucers were also observed. Since then, the story of the circles in the fields has spread across the globe and continues to remain popular. Not long ago, a film titled Signs was released, starring Mel Gibson. The phenomenon of crop circles is being thoroughly researched. One of the researchers, who spent about 2 years studying this phenomenon in southern England and Sweden, claims that the most important aspect of this mystery is that these circles do not have a natural and organic origin. There is an opinion that the crops begin to bend to the ground by themselves, without any mechanical influence. However, a BBC team led by John Mitch conducted a special examination. They brought the very prankster pensioners, Duke and Dave, to the scene and offered them to repeat their feat in front of astonished spectators. They traveled a distance twice as long and performed excellently. It is not worth speculating on the question of who actually creates the circles in the fields. The facts speak for themselves. Every person is capable of creating a perfect figure. However, if the circles in the fields are merely a hoax, how do the perpetrators manage to reach the center of the field without leaving traces in the grass? These questions intrigue lovers of all things mysterious. In the early 1990s, a small group of French ufologists traveled to southern England to study the mysterious circles more closely. The researchers soon found an explanation for this phenomenon. Gilles Munch, one of the group members, finds nothing strange in the absence of traces near the circles. Most of the centers of the circles were visible even in 2003. Usually they were located in tractor furrows, but a small percentage were found in fields without any traces of harvesting equipment. How could one reach the tractor furrows without leaving traces? The ufologists were convinced that the circles were created by 2 people using a rope. Of course, they could not start working without reaching the supposed center of the circle, but they walked across the field quite cautiously. The film recorded that with a certain caution, a person can walk across a field without leaving any traces. However, soon new circles appeared, and researchers noticed that those who created them were no longer so careful. Apparently, people were in a hurry and, without thinking, left footprints. Upon reaching the center, they could create complex figures. Ufologists found similar traces in wheat fields and studied them meticulously. Someone had carefully walked across the field, trampling several stalks right in the center of the circle. However, the central part of the circle was large, and researchers had to determine where the work had begun. The radius of action was hidden under the flattened wheat, and no matter how hard they tried, they could not find it. Eventually, they did discover the original starting point of the unknown creator of the circles. Gradually, ufologists became true professionals in determining the center of the circle. They could accurately point it out just by stepping onto the field. According to their estimates, they were correct in 95% of cases, although no precise statistics were kept. From time to time, the center turned out to be somewhat offset, and these exceptional cases fell outside their logic. There were suggestions that these were not the right traces, but most of the time they indeed found what they were looking for. Gilles Munch first encountered this phenomenon in Canada in 1975, long before the first circles appeared in the fields of England, around which such a commotion arose. However, he was not particularly interested in the phenomenon itself. Over the years, he had heard many confessions of authorship regarding the mysterious circles, which were usually created for fun or to play pranks on neighbors. In the early 70s, a series of unexplained events occurred in Manitoba, including reports of a flying saucer landing, after which bent stalks remained at the site. So what do we know about the circles today? They are more or less correct geometric figures made of flattened grass, mostly found in fields in England. There is a theory linking this phenomenon to the UFO phenomenon, but there is little real evidence for this. Perfect geometric figures in fields are quite difficult to create consciously, but in principle, a person is capable of doing it. There is much evidence for this, and the pranksters themselves around the world confess to their antics, detailing how they managed to do it. That is why, in Gillet Monk's opinion, the phenomenon of circles in fields should not be associated with the subject of ufology. To prove that crop circles are an exceptional phenomenon requiring serious study, some referred to the words of American biophysicist Levengood, who discovered a significant difference between the plants inside and outside the circle. Immediately after acknowledging the reality of the existence of crop circles, many began to doubt the objectivity and scientific methods of the researcher. Proponents of the extraterrestrial origin theory of the circles constantly cite the work of Dr. Levengood, who claimed that the stems inside and outside the circle differ at the molecular level, which means they grow differently. However, despite this, there is ample evidence that the expertise was conducted predictably. Experts were always able to determine which blade of grass belonged to the circle and which was outside its boundaries. Speaking about this, the researcher expresses doubt. I would believe the so-called blind expertise more when scientists draw conclusions without knowing where a particular specimen came from. He recalls a case from the history of science when scientists first declared that humans have 48 chromosomes, then changed that number to 46, and after recounting, returned to the original value. What I want to say is that scientists, like ordinary mortals, often see only what they want to see. They too are prone to error. In the study of the phenomenon of crop circles, only a few scientists could claim their neutrality. Most held a clear position. Either they were skeptics who wanted to prove that the circles do not alter the molecular structure of the grains, or proponents of the UFO theory who claimed the opposite. According to the researcher, a reliable examination of the circles has not been conducted, although he believes that this hardly changed anything fundamentally. There is absolutely no difference between the grains inside and outside the circles, although some circles have quite an unusual history of appearance. He adds that he would be more inclined to trust the results of the examination if he could consider it scientific and unbiased. As in the past, so today we find flaws in the circles, but now we do not pay attention to this. If this is indeed the work of an extraterrestrial intelligence, it would be logical to expect perfect geometric shapes, which cannot be said about most circles. The researcher emphasizes that with the use of modern technologies, creating such circles seems quite possible. It would be much more unusual if the stems were bent at the very top rather than at the base. Or let us say, if the grains were bent in various directions. This is indeed practically impossible to do, at least using the most ordinary field techniques and homemade devices. He also notes that if the creators of the circles were using extraterrestrial technology, they would have created much more complex forms that would leave no doubt about their extraterrestrial origin. Nowadays, fewer and fewer researchers believe in the theory of extraterrestrial origin of the crop circles. Human technology has advanced far, and it can certainly be used to create implausible figures. Even films that supposedly show the process of creating the circles by something unidentified turned out to be ordinary fabrications. However, if this is just a prank, why would people feel the need to joke in such a way? The researcher concludes that this is simply land art, where artists compete with each other, creating increasingly sophisticated forms in the fields. Indeed, there are quite unusual shapes of incredible design, which suggests a creative competition among school or university groups. Creating circles in the field does not require significant time expenditures. Students could easily create mysterious figures in wheat fields during summer vacations, using only basic knowledge of geometry and mathematics, as well as a bit of organizational skills. One does not need to be a genius to do this. In England, competitions between universities have always been popular, and therefore, crop circles can be seen as a creative competition in the field of land art. Among those who admitted to creating such figures were Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, followed by other art groups such as the Bill Bailey Gang and Merlin and Company. This information became known to the wider British press. In November 2000, computer scientist Matty Williams became the first person to be fined for the damage caused to farmers due to his artistic intervention in the fields. Fame, as is known, demands sacrifices. Moving on to another topic, not far from the Bermuda Islands, between Florida and Puerto Rico, lies a mysterious triangle known as the Bermuda Triangle. In this area, numerous ships and airplanes have mysteriously disappeared, and inexplicable events have occurred here since ancient times. Sailors from the time of Christopher Columbus claim to have seen strange lights in the sky over the triangle, and underwater, they observed unidentified submerged objects. The loudest disappearance in the Bermuda Triangle occurred on the 5th of December 1945, when a squadron of bombers left the Fort Lauderdale military air base. The squadron was heading east with the aim of bombing an old ship moored off the coast of Florida and returning to base. These were routine exercises. At 3:40 in the afternoon, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the commander of the squadron, reported to base about an unusual incident. His instruments had malfunctioned, and he did not understand where he was. Taylor added that, according to his understanding, he was flying over Florida. The dispatchers unsuccessfully attempted to bring the planes back to land, but soon radio contact with the squadron was lost. Search operations began at 7:30 in the evening. The military concluded that the missing planes had crashed over the ocean due to a lack of fuel. However, the troubles did not end there. A search plane also disappeared near Fort Lauderdale. In total, 27 people and 6 planes vanished into thin air in the mysterious Bermuda Triangle. The command of the United States Navy concluded that the pilots made a fatal mistake, but no wreckage was found. What happened to this large amount of metal and dozens of people? Mystery enthusiasts believe that this incident was a result of extraterrestrial activity in the Bermuda Triangle, which is often associated with the UFO phenomenon. The legendary triangle represents a section of sea where numerous ships and planes have disappeared. Naturally, this place attracts the attention of researchers, among whom is even one of my relatives. Many books have been written about the Bermuda Triangle, both by skeptics and proponents of the UFO theory. Nevertheless, the statistics of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle may be somewhat exaggerated. There are planes and vessels that regularly pass through this area without any problems, being operated by professionals. There are also testimonies from dispatchers managing traffic on air and water routes. It should not be forgotten that drugs are often attempted to be smuggled through the Bermuda Triangle, and after the capture of a vessel carrying such cargo, it is inevitably sunk. There is nothing supernatural about this. With an objective analysis, the number of missing vessels and planes in the Bermuda Triangle may seem ordinary, not exceeding the average figures of any other area. Nevertheless, strange rumors circulate about the Bermuda Triangle, and incredible stories have occurred here. Analyzing these cases, one can conclude that some of them can be explained by the action of methane gases, which significantly reduce the resistance of water. As a result, any object, especially a massive ship, can sink instantly. Although this theory needs confirmation, it seems plausible. The most famous story of the Bermuda Triangle, according to many, is the main mystery in human history, the vanishing of the 19th Squadron without a trace. Remains of other airplanes and vessels have often been found on the seabed. However, this squadron apparently simply dissolved into thin air. Contact with the airplanes was not lost immediately. At first, they simply got lost, and the pilots constantly communicated with the dispatchers, describing how the sea and sky looked different than usual. It is likely that their coordinates were incorrect. They changed their course several times and in the end disappeared without a trace. On one hand, one might say that these were young, inexperienced pilots, but they were led by a true professional. The leader was supposed to return the squadron to base without losses. Perhaps they lost each other and then they ran out of fuel, causing all the airplanes to fall into the sea. However, on that day, a group of the most experienced pilots was sent to search for the missing squadron, and the search airplane also disappeared, leaving no traces. This can hardly be considered a coincidence. This story requires a different interpretation. One possible explanation is the presence of an electromagnetic field of colossal strength in the area being studied, which disrupted all the equipment readings and effectively destroyed the fuel reserves of the airplanes. Moreover, the airplane that went to search for the missing squadron was known for its unreliability. This theory implies the existence of something very strange in the triangle capable of creating an electromagnetic field of such power. Although the Bermuda Triangle does not seem like much of a mystery, at least it is hard to believe what the press writes about it. But something did happen there, and that something led to the formation of electromagnetic radiation. Perhaps it is a massive meteorite on the seabed, perhaps something else, and its effect manifests not constantly but from time to time. Some believe that the airplanes moved to another dimension or got stuck in time. One of the versions is the intervention of UFOs, and there is also an intriguing idea about some kind of temporal portal. Of course, there is the possibility of strong underwater whirlpools, and this section of the ocean is indeed quite turbulent. Ufologists believe that pilots and sailors have been abducted by aliens, which also applies to airplanes and ships. This is depicted in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where a squadron appears in the desert at the very beginning, and then the pilots return there at the end. This film immortalizes the myth, although there is no obvious connection between the UFO phenomenon and the Bermuda Triangle. The only thread is that UFOs have indeed appeared in this area, but they have also been spotted in other places. Nevertheless, the Bermuda Triangle occupies a completely unique place among other unexplained phenomena. The number of disappearances here is astonishing, and all the disappearances that have occurred in this area have become known as the Fordian phenomena. Ford understood that our world is far more mysterious than we imagine. The oddities described by Charles Fort may not be related to UFOs. However, they continue to intrigue people's minds, as the universe is limitless not only in time and space. There are many unknown laws and unexplained facts in the world, and the endless stories about oddities and mysteries only confirm this. UFOs, facts, and fabrications are a topic that continues to spark interest. Exploring the mysterious phenomenon of UFOs opens doors to reflections on the future.